Good afternoon, everybody. This is exactly 5 p.m. on 15th of August 2020 on occasion of this Independence Day and our 180th CME of NMDF. I welcome you all for a very interactive CME on a subject which is very important for all of us. I have got my co-speakers with me, and I'm just going to explain you what is the way in which we are going to and what are the points which we are going to discuss. So this is the schedule. We have got 4 of my esteemed faculty members. Dr. Ajay Kukreja is a MD MRCP from Terna Medical College and practices in Seawood. Another young dynamic intensivist from Navi Mumbai CBD Nanesh Hospital, Dr. Nikhil Varge. A very dedicated chest consultant from Kharghar, works in Swasth Hospital, very active academically is Dr. Vishal Gupta, and our own family member, Dr. Minakshi Kure, who is a nutritionist, who is going to be talking about the immunoboosters. Friends, this is going to be a very simple interactive session. What are the points which we are going to cover? Basically, how patients behave pre and post discharge. Do they maintain follow-up properly? How seriously? Because the commonest problem with all our patients are they are unable to go to the treating doctor because the treating doctor is in the COVID center and he is many of the times he is in PPE and he cannot see the patient. What are the problems they face in general? One of the biggest problem which Dr. Arun Kure also pointed out and all our members also pointed out is unexplained amount of fatigue and weakness, respiratory problems, breathlessness at rest, or even on activities of daily life. What do you mean by activities of daily life? Going to toilet, taking a bath, dressing yourself, taking a child around in home. So this needs good amount of pulmonary rehabilitation. As far as the cardiology symptoms are concerned, breathlessness, palpitations, chest pain, however vague it may be, but we cannot ignore in patients who are suffering from comorbidities like diabetes, COPD. In the gastrointestinal tract, the biggest problem is appetite, loss of appetite. In the skin and joints, there are aches and pains, some rashes. Nutrition is definitely impaired. People lose their muscle mass, that is called as a sarcopenia. So you need something which is going to modulate your immune system, which is going to give you a weight gain. And at the same time, there are huge amount of emotional problems. I'm going to take the emotional problems in between as a filler because that is one of the biggest concern of our society today. Adjustment disorder, lot of psychological issues. And then prevention, everybody knows the SMS formula, but prevention of further complications, when to follow, how to follow, what is the frequency, when to repeat HRCT. What are the vaccinations which give a better immunity against other comorbid diseases? And lastly, all the panelists are going to sum up the practical points, how to approach post-COVID patient. So now I stop my sharing and I just check whether Dr. Ajay Kukreja has checked in.
Hello everyone. Thanks a lot, sir, for this opportunity.
Ajay, I need to unmute you. Just wait.
Sir,
I have to make you. I have to make you co-host.
sir, I am unmuted myself.
Okay, now you can. You are the co-host. Now just see whether you can share your slides.
Yes.
Whether you can share your screen. I am stopping sharing of my screen, and Ajay, please check whether you can. Can you share your screen? Yes. Ajay has been very instrumental for all of us in Mapicon, and he was really fought his battle when he dealt with MMC. So Ajay, please go ahead.
Yes.
Go to the full screen. Go to the full screen.
Welcome everyone.
Go to slideshow.
Yeah.
Full screen or slideshow, anything. Arun, you are monitoring the chat also, no?
Yes, sir.
So the topic for today is there are multiple topics. What I am given is post-COVID care. Dr. Nikhil Varghese is going to tell us about what do we do in our inpatients. What I want to cover is basically what do family physicians do once we discharge the patients from here. Now it's a pandemic. We have around 90 to 100 patients in the hospital at any given point of time. So we don't see, frankly speaking, we don't see the finer points. We don't see whether we just check whether the sugar is grossly normal or not. We just check whether the patient is overall doing well or not. We just see them COVID wise. We don't see majority of the other things, which we think we will deal with it later. So if a patient complains to us anything other than that, we tell him, please follow up with us after a week of getting all right from the COVID. So when this patient, once it goes out, once they go back to their home, they are going to call all their own family physicians. And what are you going to see? And what should you see? And how should you deal with? That is what we are talking about today. So we usually tell these patients to follow up after a week of COVID because as it is, they are given 7 days of home isolation. They are not supposed to go out in those 7 days. So after those 7 days, when they come to you, they are going to come with multiple complaints. The commonest being cough and the second commonest being weakness, tiredness and fatigue. Majority of these patients lose at least 2 to 3 kgs of weight and they really feel weak and they really feel tired. This is very common with COVID, this is common with dengue, and this is common with typhoid. These three disorders cause a lot of weakness, they cause a lot of fatigue. So there are multiple ways in which you can deal with them, with it. What I have found is there are a few multivitamins which help them a lot. You have to tell them to have a lot of dry fruits. You have to tell them to have a lot of fruits and let them enjoy whatever they want to eat. And in multivitamins, what I usually give is something called as Vitnuron CZS, which helps them a lot in recuperating very fast. And sometimes I use syrup B1 because B1.
Ajay, can you can you raise your voice?
Yeah.
Slightly.
Now it's better?
Yes.
Yeah. So because B1 increases the appetite, it's a multivitamin, but it increases the appetite quite well. So they start eating more, they start feeling better. And even Vitnuron CZS and vitamin D, these two things help them to recuperate very fast. So these are the three things that I am using and it is helping a lot. What do you need to check? Now, you have to ask all patients whether they required oxygen or they did not require oxygen. If they required oxygen, that means they had gone bad. That just means that they are prone to have bad clots. Such kind of patients develop large vessel or medium vessel clots. So now we are getting patients who come back with heart attacks, strokes, intracerebral bleeds, deep vein thrombosis. So all these complications of COVID, we are now facing them. Right now, while we are talking, I just got a call that we have a patient whose COVID antibody is positive, but the patient is having MI. So these are the patients who are basically COVID is making them reach into something called as hypercoagulable state. That is the blood gets thick. So whichever patient was on oxygen or or in other words, the D dimer was high, these patients should be on anticoagulation. So you can use very simple anticoagulants. You can use Rivaroxaban 10 milligram once a day for 1 month. You can use Pradaxa 110 twice a day for a month, or simply you can use Ecosprin 150, Ecosprin AV, which helps better, 150 every day at night for at least 1 to 3 months, depending on the severity. We are trying to start it in all patients, but there are patients that we miss prescribing this, and this we have started only since July. So patients who were admitted in June and first or second week of July, majority of the hospitals were not using it. After we started getting complications, so when these patients are coming to you, please start them on antiplatelets if they were mild cases, or if they were moderate or severe. If they are telling you we had gone in the ICU, it's better you start them on these 3 tablets that I told you. And what will you check in these patients? It is CBC and D dimer levels. I have got patients who we had discharged who did not require oxygen. They got fever again after 15-20 days. They, just because they were scared, they did all the tests again, including RT-PCR. Their antibodies were positive. They were COVID negative, but their D dimer was really high. So this means that they are in a high thrombotic state. So all these patients should be on anticoagulants and antiplatelets. The world over, majority hospitals are following this now. Another thing that we are finding very commonly is there are these new and weird infections that we are getting. In the sense, even today in the clinic, I got a patient who is 1 month post COVID. He has developed lymph nodes all over the body. He came with fever. When I investigated him, he had developed lymph nodes all over the body. I don't know what it is, but there is generalized lymphadenopathy, which is a common feature in any immunocompromised state. So when we are using this tocilizumab in any patient, the effect of tocilizumab is coming for 3-4 weeks. It is running for 3-4 weeks. So even after discharge for the next 3 to 4 weeks, these patients are immunocompromised. Means their immunity is really low. So these patients are going to come to you with cold, cough, loose motions, all kinds of different kinds of fever. Use higher antibiotics in this. Usually we use we use the BLBLIs, like we use Augmentin, Clavum, basically amoxicillin, clavulanate. But these patients who have been discharged from the hospital, who have received tocilizumab, they are not responding to these normal antibiotics. You'll have to use third generation cephalosporins in this. You have to use cefixime, cefodoxime. You have to use sometimes combination of cefodoxime along with clavulanate to treat even their normal throat infections. So if they have received tocilizumab, assume it, they can have any kind of infection in the next 4 weeks. And that is what we are getting here. Even patients whom we are removing out of the ICU, when we are sending them in the normal ICU because they have not recovered, we are getting all kind of fungal infections now. From the blood, from the tube, from the secretions, we are getting cryptococcus, which we see only in HIV patients. We are getting Candida infections, which is a normal fungal infection, we are getting it in the blood just because of tocilizumab. So tocilizumab has severe side effects, and these patients are going to come to you now. So expect all kinds of weird infections. Don't think before investigating them. At least do a CBC, urine routine, and CRP. You will get a basic idea as to what exactly is happening with them. And this is not all. The new normal, now every one of us has to use masks in our clinic at least for the next 6 months. Do not be shy of minimum of 6 months. Even if you get vaccinated, once the vaccine comes, don't expect the vaccine to come before January 2021, because there are only 2 or 3 successful vaccinations, Moderna and the Russian vaccine. They are not going to come to India before January. So at least till January, even if you are vaccinated, at least for the next 2 to 3 months, please use masks. We don't know how efficacious the vaccine is. So please use masks at least till the next March. And if now the patients will start giving flying kisses to their girlfriends because there's no other option. Not just post-COVID, I would request everyone. I think all of you are getting calls from different nodal officers and ward officers and UHP officers to inform you or each and every patient of fever. The thing is, now we have reached to a stage where the mortality is just 2%. 2% means 2 out of 100. And what we are observing is these patients are only those patients who are reaching to the hospital rate late. So if the saturation is below 88-85% when they are reaching to us, the chances of survival are decreasing by half. But now it is not so that COVID is not treatable. If the patient is coming on time, we are able to save the patients. So please, in your regular OPD, fever, no fever, any kind of patient, please check the saturation of each and every patient. If you don't have a pulse oximeter, the commissioner has already given a request and appeal that whichever GP wants a pulse oximeter, the government is going to provide them. But please note down saturation of each and every patient who is coming to your OPD and note it down on your paper, because that is what is going to happen next. The commissioner is planning to send UHP officers to each and every clinic just to see the papers as to which you are filling. And you are going to get a new prescription format which you have to fill for each and every patient. So the best thing to do is check saturation of each and every patient. If the patient is telling you we don't want to get the COVID check, please force them, give them a scare of death, because if they reach late, they are going to die. Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you for giving me.
Ajay, thank you very much. I got now 2 questions for you. So whenever a patient is coming to you, you have to ask whether आपको 5,000 इंजेक्शन 5,000 के 6 इंजेक्शन लगाए थे या 50,000 का एक लगाया था, बराबर है?
बराबर है सर.
हाँ, 50,000 का एक है, that is more dangerous. And
Yes.
secondly, what is the behavior of the people when they are about to be discharged or they are on discharge, whether they are very jubilant, like dancing, like that what was seen on one of the WhatsApp video, or they are more worried about the future and contacts and spread to the family. What is your observation? Or you can talk with when the other people join us. Okay. So
Yes.
Ajay, you can stop sharing your screen. I have to just check. Dr. Mahesh, I am going to unmute you. Dr. Mahesh Padsarge joined us. I will
Yes,
ask
sir.
Mahesh, please share your experience, because Mahesh has a very huge experience of HIV and H1N1. Actually for
So
him it is a it's a trial ball for him. Please go ahead.
basically, I also read at least half an hour to 1 hour about COVID every day. At least I see a lot of information which are coming. And as post-COVID, the main important symptom which I believe is very much weakness to the patient. And as he mentions before that hypercoagulable state. So I was just checking that why this hypercoagulable state is coming. So it has been found out that vitamin K actually is deficient people will have this hypercoagulable state. So I was just reading the article that if vitamin K, if it is deficient, then how it is going to cause clots. So the thing is, like, if you have vitamin K deficiency, and whatever the vitamin K is available in your body, it will be used by the liver. But inside the endothelial cell, the protein C is there at the endothelial cell wall. So there also, for the activation of protein C, vitamin K is needed. So many of the patients who are having vitamin K deficiency, they will probably face these thrombosis events, because till now there is no reports which has been found out that platelet dysfunction really happens. But hypercoagulable state is really which has been seen, as you all have worked upon, seen increasing D dimers and all. So this vitamin K has to be again seen. And very importantly, many people like Dr. Paul Marik, who has prepared a Math Plus protocol for COVID management from OPD to till the post-COVID era. Actually, he has divided this therapy of COVID patients in 4 different stages. And again, he feels that statin will be the best treatment for post-era, because this will be a generalized inflammatory process. So as Ajay was mentioning that Ecosprin AV will be, I think we should 100% continue this Ecosprin AV to all of the patients, even though they will have symptoms or they will not be having symptoms. I think this is the best thing which we can do.
Thank you, Mahesh.
I would like to.
Yes, Ajay.
Please add.
What Padsarge sir said.
Yeah.
This is absolutely, and that's why we are seeing it more commonly in alcoholics. So
Yeah, yeah,
what
yeah.
we are, yeah. So what we
That's
are
the
doing
reason
is we
I
are,
will. I can share the article also where they have seen in the COVID patients that vitamin C, vitamin K deficiency happens because of this stressful COVID era, and this whatever the vitamin K is available in the body will be used by the liver for production of vitamin K dependent coagulable factors. But the same vitamin K which is needed for protein C activation at endothelial cells, there it is deficient, and that's the reason vitamin K is very much needed in this post COVID era.
so
So
another
that is
take
what
home,
is I read, and it has been time tested and research based.
yeah. So another take home message is if you have an alcoholic patient, please start him on benfotiamine. Otherwise, he'll be more
Yes.
hypercoagulated.
Okay. Ajay, please don't go. Nikhil, over to you.
Okay, sir.
Thank you, sir.
I'll be sharing my screen.
Yes.
So as Ajay has already started with this topic, and everyone who is working currently in OPDs or in healthcare sector, we are going to face with a lot of people who are going to be suffering from or infected from COVID, or who might be carrying this infection but they do not know. So I'm just going to briefly touch on few points. What is our experience with managing these patients in IPD care? What are the points I think you should also be aware of, because you will be the people who will be the first line of contact with these patients and who will be dealing with the relatives on a longer scale. So if you ask me now, people will be coming to your OPDs and will be asking, we have not been out of our homes for 3 months, 4 months, and who will be affected? Why will we be affected? So I think the answer to this question is everyone is at risk of getting infected now. There are a few people from Belapur, and they all know that we had an old age home. There was a huge outbreak where 11 elderly people, bedbound, who had not been out of that center for 6 months, were affected, because maybe other people who are going outside and coming in contact with them will carry infection to them. Because we are in a stage of community transmission, we will be facing them. More importantly, we'll have to be very much careful about healthcare workers, because if they are symptomatic, anyone working in a hospital, anyone working in contact with patients, they will be always at a higher risk of getting infected. So once these patients are infected, what is the rate of severity? Who will be affected more severely? Yes, there are already tested and proved things into WhatsApp media, into scientific websites. But these are the other factors that we have to be careful about. Obesity. We have seen many young patients who are not documented to be diabetic or hypertensive, but are having BMI more than 30, who will be affected more severely by COVID. We had an experience of our own one duty doctor who is just 30-year-old, but is having a BMI of 35. He is non-diabetic, non-hypertensive, but he landed up in ICU and was in ICU for almost close to 10 days. Fortunately, with the therapies, he recovered, but that becomes a risk factor. Obviously, elderlies, because elderlies are having a lot of issues while cooperating with the therapy. The one major part that we face during this patient's treatment is these patients are going to be staying alone in the COVID centers. Now, at present, where Ajay and me work together in Terna COVID unit, there are close to 100 patients admitted, and out of these 100, around 40 are elderly. Some of them even require assistance while walking. Now, these patients are staying away from their relatives in a you can say an alien environment, where they see people in white suit only. They cannot see anybody's faces. They cannot recognize anybody's voices, because the government is also now forcing that they are allowed to have a communication devices with them, where they will be constantly in touch with their families with their smartphones, or to some extent make video calls. But the caring for these people, how they will comply with the therapy. Many of these elderly people do not put oxygen mask continuously as required. They will not be able to perform physiotherapies as required. We tell them instructions about awake proning and all. Sometimes they do not follow. That becomes another risk factor when the recovery from this infection becomes concerned. Yes, diabetes and hypertensive patients, you will, sir will agree, and a lot of people with diabetes will suddenly have uncontrolled sugars, and they will present to your OPDs because of uncontrolled sugars. We have seen that in COVID, that diabetic people have very varying degrees of hyperglycemias. And most of these patients who we initially admit for uncontrolled sugars, and then we check their vitals and we find the saturation is on a lower side, and then we test these patients for COVID and they turn out to be positive. Another subset of patient where these patients cannot be restricted at home are dialysis patients. So we have a dialysis at Belapur, and we understand that these people will be going regularly out and coming in contact with other patients and other healthcare facility patients, because they will be going for twice a week for a dialysis or thrice a week for a dialysis. And these patients, because of their affected immunity, or these patients are considered immunocompromised, they will catch up the infection very early. There is one problem that their immunity do not make them show all the correct signs of CKD. So fortunately, most of these patients will have more or less stable course, because they do not land in the cytokine storm that we characteristically see in other patients. But they become a very difficult challenge to manage, because most of these centers do not have dialysis facility. Those COVID centers with dialysis facilities are very much limited, and if these patients are missed, they will be infecting other patients who they will be coming in contact with. Chronic lung disease, yes, we all understand those people with poor lung reserve will definitely be at more severity scale. Now you will see different guidelines coming periodically. We all know from the time that we started in March into April first week, the guidelines were to admit patients for 14 days, test them for twice to come PCR report negative, and then only discharge. Now the things have changed. The NMMC Corporation, I think Panvel Corporation has also agreed there will be a lot of patients who can go for home isolation. Now these people who are on home isolation, maybe they will be in touch with you. So we will have to identify other risk factors than breathlessness. Breathlessness obviously will be the last thing to come, and when it comes, obviously every patient understands that they need to get admitted. But these are the other things that we look at. We look at fever with fatigue, cough with continuous expectoration and yellowish sputums. We look at desaturation. Most of these pulse oximeter in home isolation kits are available to patients themselves, and they will keep on sending you WhatsApp images. Rely on the WhatsApp images more than the patient's interpretation, because we have seen patients hiding their normal saturations. They will try to tell you their saturations are 95, and when you actually see that the saturations are 90 and 91. But people want to avoid admission because they feel now that they can be treated home. And the fear for COVID is on a wane, and that's why probably people are losing their guards also. And if anyone has comorbidities, obviously such patients are better monitored in hospital settings, because you never know when they will turn bad. And when the patients turn bad, searching a bed in that emergency becomes a chaotic issue. Ajay and me face a lot of calls on a day-to-day basis. Vishal must be facing them similarly, that patients are losing their lives in ambulances, running from hospital to hospital. Obviously, with breathlessness, most of the patients do seek medical attention to get admitted. What we generally do when we admit the patients, whether they are stable, whether they are symptomatic, or whether they are asymptomatic, we generally check for the assessment. We make an assessment for their severity, which to some extent, if at all any patient comes to your OPDs, you can also make whether the patient have tachycardia, whether they have tachypnea, or whether they are desaturating while speaking, or whether they are desaturating while walking. This is a clinical assessment of severity, which is going to give us some idea how these patients are going to do in next 8 to 10 days. In the hospitals, yes, we have an array of tools like radiological and biochemical investigations. But in OPD basis, if you are suspecting a patient who is likely to be COVID, and the PCR is going to take time, or he comes at odd hours, there are multiple radiological centers which are having people who are experienced with CT reportings, and they can report the patients on early basis. Now we have 2 patients admitted with us whose COVID report is yet to come, but we asked patient to go for CT, and CT report was immediately available within 3 hours. And on the basis of CT, we have documented datum high likely to be COVID, and they are being started on remdesivir. So obviously, the most important thing that is needed for these patients is going to be oxygen, along with other therapies. Oxygen is the premost thing, because most of the patients before these drugs like remdesivir came by the June end, we had discharged around 300-400 patients on the routine therapies that were available at that time, including SCQS and vitamins C and zinc, and most importantly, oxygen. Because oxygen support tends to bring this patient quite back to a normal physiology. Sometimes we do see cases where the oxygen is not maintained and these patients are hypoxic and they are not feeling breathless. but we have realized that correcting these oxygen levels in them helps, because the cellular level biochemical abnormalities, including lactic acidosis, can worsen. When the patients are admitted, obviously antivirals are easy to get. The antivirals are not very readily available in the outside market and in other hospitals which are not COVID centers. And yes, in other therapies which we are doing, that we do give patients a regular incentive spirometries and awake pronings and SOS required ventilatory supports. We all know what exactly works and what probably will work. So definitely there are certain things which are going to make a difference. Antivirals, remdesivir has been there with us for almost 6 to 7 weeks now, and that drug really helps patient with LRTI. The lung clearance is better, the oxygen requirement improves faster. Steroids to some extent, yes, they are definitely indicated. We have seen patients recovering with use of steroids. Anticoagulation, we are using regularly. We had a hypoxia protocol which is set up by Dr. Ajay, and that works very fine when these patients receive anticoagulations. Physiotherapy, because these patients have to be mobile. Our normal lungs are meant to be breathing well in an erect posture. When these patients are made to rest on bed continuously, the physiotherapy plays a role. And to some extent immunomodulation, where most of the other drugs like SCQS and colchicine are going to be. Now, what problems we face in ICUs and IPD cares is we cannot predict the course of the disease. Sometimes you people who are in communication with us would want to know, okay, what is going to happen to this patient. Now, this patient is doing well, he is requiring just minimal O2 support for 2 to 3 days, and you would want us to say, okay, he will be discharged in 4th day or 5th day. But the disease course is unpredictable. Sometimes patients have bad x-rays and bad reports, but they do well over a course of next 3 to 4 days. And sometimes people are having normal x-rays and mild hypoxia, but they suddenly deteriorate over a period of time. Other problem is managing this huge number of patients in limited settings, because you all must be facing that whenever we diagnose a patient with COVID, it is difficult to find beds. You and me both will have to call different number, different hospitals to get a bed. And wherever these patients are admitted, there are a huge number of patients admitted in limited facility. So managing them all together is the issue. Oxygen therapies, again, because the both understanding of the paraclinical staff, the patients and us is on different grounds where the oxygen therapies are required. So that becomes one of the problem that we face. Communication with family, because the patients are not accompanied by relatives. So whole healthcare structure that we are used to, where we used to speak to patients when we used to have a bad patient in ICU, or when we are doing the procedure, or when we are making an intervention, that is just not happening. Most of the communication is happening on phone. The relatives are not able to see the patient, so they cannot gauge the problem. Sometimes they feel the patient was speaking to me on phone very fine, and you are saying the patient is going to be bad and he's going to require that thing. So there is some amount of miscommunication and mistrust, and there are social media posts where people say, yes, Gabbar is back and all thing, and then we are at the receiving end of the people's wrath. Availability of drugs, that is one problem that we face, because these all high-end drugs are not readily available even till now. After 2 months of governmental interventions and multiple companies into play, these drugs are not readily available. So we all have been having our own share of experience with managing COVID patients. We at Terna COVID unit have completed more than 1,000 patients who are now discharged from that facility. We have faced multiple ICU patients in different settings. In Belapur also we faced patients with COVID because they were not getting bed anywhere. We all hope that over the period of time the pandemic will settle and there will be less patients coming and everyone will get beds in available time. This is a brief chart which shows that how the risk factors worsen. So those people with lung disease probably have not that bad impact because of COVID, but obesity, if you look at, there are two conditions here, obesity with BMI of 30 and BMI of 40. So these are going to be more important risk factors. Anything specifically, sir, that I would like to have to add?
Yes, there is a question in chat box.
Okay.
Doctor Shailesh Gala has asked, patient with fever, CBC is totally normal, ESR is normal, ESR is 8, CT scan suggests ground glass opacity is on the right side, mid and lower zone. What can be done? What should be the step?
Sir, if the CT scan is showing, again, as we discussed, if the patient is elderly, has comorbidities, and has a CT scan finding which is likely to be of COVID, so this patient is to be tested obviously for RT-PCR, and such patients, if they are clinically indicated, if they are having hypoxia on room air, probably they should be treated as COVID without waiting for further test.
And what Mahesh has rightly pointed out, remdesivir, it has just showed to reduce the hospital stay. What is your experience? Does it make a really great difference in the outcome?
Sir, even Mahesh sir's line has a huge difference. Even if it reduces ICU stay by 3 to 4 days, it does make a lot of difference, because we are short of beds. Vishal, I think SOAS has a similar condition. We are so short of beds, we don't get ICU beds for patients, and the patients have to be sent, because anyone with a saturation of less than 90 will eventually require a ICU bed, and ICU
So
beds are so short.
Nikhil, my was not that. Basically, we have 50 doctors who are listening to you,
Yes, sir.
and many of the times our doctors' relatives are admitted in various ICUs and hospitals, and they are becoming very panicked to get this remdesivir drug. Okay, so my point is they should not be so much panicked, even though the drug is not getting immediately. They will not. The patient is not going to survive or die. My main point is, anyway, it is reducing ICU stay for 3 to 4 days, but it is not been reducing the mortality. So that's the reason they should not worry so much about the availability of the drug. If it is available, really you should give if you are experiencing. That's my, Akshay is also joined. If Akshay has also used remdesivir, or you or Ajay Kukreja, like you feel like sometime before you have seen the 2 periods. The availability period also was there 6 weeks, and before 6 weeks you just remember whether the patients, when remdesivir was not available, patients were dying too much, or whether remdesivir is available and patients are becoming alive. That is my main point of asking
Sir,
question. Yes, yes.
when we have used remdesivir in patients who are having lung involvements, yes, there are certain patients who are not deteriorating and going to ICU. That's maybe our limited subset of 1,000 patients teaches us that. Ajay?
It's definitely helping, sir. It's decreasing the viral load. We can say that. For mortality, we need more evidence. We need to do more studies. But it is definitely helping us. I would like Akshay sir to comment on it.
Yeah, Akshay is also there, I think.
Akshay, you
can
unmute
speak.
yourself. Akshay. Akshay Talani. Actually, we will allow these things to be ongoing, but I wanted the answer to Dr. Gala's question. His patient's SpO2 is 98, only because he has got a shadows and he's waiting for his RT-PCR report. Nikhil or Ajay, would you like to start him on antivirals directly?
So, as the criteria is for mild, he can, if the saturation is 98 and he has a CT finding of ground glass opacities, he can be considered as mild disease. And Ajay and me would like to start him on favipiravir, right, Ajay?
Saturation rate, actually HCQS or FabiFlu. I would prefer HCQS. We use FabiFlu. By guidelines, it is mild to moderate, but we tried. I tried to postpone it. If the patient is going into moderate condition, then I use FabiFlu. Otherwise, HCQS, till the saturation is not falling, whatever you use does not matter.
Okay.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
Sir. Yeah, so basically, if you all go through the protocols across the world for treating COVID-19, so basically, if you miss the bus of initial 6 days, then patient is going to die. Basically, the disease is having 3 stages. First, the infective or viral stage. Second, which is the immune response stage. Now, in this doctor's case, the patient has been started symptom. That means the day of symptom, the viral load is getting up. The peak of viral load actually happens at the day of 4. It is not the fever which I am saying. Any symptom, any weakness, body ache, any symptom should be considered as day 1. And from day 1, if you believe that ground glass appearance whose chest was previously normal, you checked for the HRCT without any symptom and still it is giving some immune reaction to the ground glass appearance, that means it is an immune reaction to the lungs. So I think this patient immediately should be started on antiviral. Either you should be using hydroxychloroquine with zinc, or either if you want to give this favipiravir, if patient is good to take 36 tablets or 48 tablets over the period of 2-3 days, till the time the report comes, because we get reports nowadays with antigen immediately within 1 hour, or you have to wait for 24 hours also or 48 hours. But we should not spend that two days of time. You should be immediately act as antiviral drug to this patient. That is what is I believe.
Sir, in the last 900 patients, 950 patients that we have had, we have done a CT scan of not more than 100, I think. Not more
Okay.
than. So ground glass opacities, even if the patient is having, what we are seeing is almost 70 to 80% of patients having COVID are having X-ray opacity. So we can't go with the HRCT, we can't go with the X-ray opacity. We have to go with the saturation level. We have seen
No,
patients
that's fine.
patch.
You,
We have seen patients having a big patch, but the saturation is 98. So we cannot correlate it with the ground glass opacity. You can correlate it with the CT severity score, but even that is changing. So after a certain period of time, even the CT severity score is not, if he has a secondary infection, the ground glass opacity increases because of the secondary infection. So this patient, as you're saying, the ground glass opacity is there. There are chances, rather I would say, if he's a young guy, there are chances he'll not require anything. And we have discharged such patients. Matlab, we have not done CT scan. We are depending on X-rays. We are using CT scan only and only to diagnose patients who are RT-PCR negative, but we have to catch them for COVID just because they are
yeah,
not
that,
listening to us. And
Okay.
second,
yes, Ajay,
using a
that
CT
I got your point. But
Huh.
you are working in inpatient management. Okay, this doctor is working for outpatient management. Unless and until the SpO2 comes down to less than 94, he is not going to send this patient to you.
Yes.
So basically, my point is, patient doctor is sitting in the OPD, he sees ground glass appearance, and he tells the patient that you just wait, that 94% of the saturation will come, and then we will send to Terna. It's not like that. My question, whether the infection has started or not, that
Yeah.
question's answer we have got from the HRCT, because HRCT ground glass opacity will not come automatically. And
Right.
it is not the viral, it is not actually the virus is invaded in the lungs. It is basically the immune response has immediately started. That means the virus has gone inside the body. So
Yeah.
my question is, rather than not doing anything, we should act immediately within 1 day to 5 days with antiviral. Whichever the antiviral you want to use, you can use that antiviral and wait for the response to get that immune response by seeing this hypoxia. That is what is my point.
Okay,
What you're
Mahesh,
saying,
Yeah.
I got it. Ajay, now hold on. See, because we are mostly considering the points which are related to the family practitioners in the follow-up period. But this is a very valid question for a walking patient of a relative of any COVID positive patient who has got ground glass opacity, his oxygen saturation is normal, CBCSR is normal. Will you start oral antiviral? And if oral antiviral you will start, what is the drug of choice? What is your experience of favipiravir? Both Ajay and Nikhil, only 2 or 3 sentences, whether you will use it or not, because Vishal is waiting for the major pulmonary component.
So we would prefer to have this patient on FabiFlu. It works. It has helped our patients, and I think it is one of the recommended drugs in the list. So no other choice of orals is currently in the recommendations. So we would like to stick to it.
Ajay?
that is what the future is. Basically, like in H1N1, every patient who was coming with fever and we were suspecting H1N1, radically oseltamivir was started. So in the next few days or maybe a few months, that is what is going to happen with FabiFlu. Each and every family physician can start it even with fever. You're suspecting COVID, do an antigen test and start FabiFlu. That is true, then that is the future.
Okay, now this combination of question you are going to get. Patient with fever, normal CBC, normal lymphocytic neutrophil ratio, his antibody titers are low. Somebody has done his antibody titers. Antigen is negative. Is it a sufficient ground to give antiviral? Are we justified?
Antiviral depends on the symptoms, sir. Does not depend on the antibody titer.
So as far as the antibodies are concerned, our experience is this is not like dengue where you will get antibodies positive in 1 week of disease. Most of the patients have significant antibody titers after say 2 weeks of symptom onset, or maybe when the recovery is almost complete. So your antibody titers generally do not help in deciding the treatment. Sorry, it is just an epidemiological.
Okay. Got it. Thank you, Ajay. Thank you, Nikhil. You stay with us. Nikhil, you stop sharing your screen Vishal, have you unmuted yourself? Vishal,
Yeah, sir, done. Unmuted, done.
you are unmuted. You have got any presentation to make?
I have screens to share, so I will be doing that.
Yes.
I'll be presenting the way you have asked me the questions, or the questions you have asked.
Yes, you
I'm
please
Dr.
start sharing your
Vishal. I'm a
screen.
consultant.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm a consultant chest physician here in New Bombay. Very much thank you, sir, for the valuable time that everybody is giving to us, and for Dr. S.C. Kulkarni, sir, who has organized this. My topic mainly will be dealing with how do we deal with post-COVID infections or post-COVID related problems. And considering that COVID does cause pneumonia, I'll just start sharing my screen. Yeah.
Are you doing it for your laptop, for your mobile?
Yeah, from my laptop, sir. It's already ready. Can you see the screen, sir?
Yes, I can see your desktop.
Yeah, yeah.
So Vishal, just a minute withdrawal we want. Yeah, I am really happy that today we have got almost at one time we had around 50 participants. And you must thank the efforts of two persons in bringing this kind of organization called as Navi Mumbai Doctors Foundation. Dr. Arun Kure is there in the meeting. Dr. Kiran Godse is not there in the meeting, but he has a great effort to start it. We do not take any sponsorship. We are not promoting anybody's products. It is a totally academic discussion, and you should attend this kind of programs regularly. You should give us a lot of inputs, and we will restore or share our resources like what Mahesh is done. See, it is a collective wisdom. Actually, Mahesh is the cause of me in Navi Mumbai. There are two other people who pulled me from Khopoli to Navi Mumbai. Another is Somnath, and third is Kailas Gokral. These three people are a great knowledge resource people. Mahesh is going to share his vitamin K file as well as whatever we have got material with us, that it is available to you free. You can use it. Even my presentation, whatever presentation you want, these presentations are available with you for public education, medical education. Over to you, Vishal.
Right. So the question was in the post-COVID era, how are we going to be dealing with pulmonary problems? I think everybody has spoken. I was extremely happy that points of OPD and IPD are being discussed separately regarding coronavirus. The virus load once it starts, after it invades the body, and then following that there is antigen presentation, and this is the point at which cytokines will be involved. These cytokines basically are IL-1 beta, IL-6, and other list of interleukins. This is very, very important because we have seen drugs like tocilizumab and enrolizumab. These have been used against anti-interleukin drugs. I mean, these are anti-interleukin drugs, receptor blockers, monoclonal antibodies, which are helpful in particularly reducing the inflammatory load in this particular disease. Then you have the cellular immunity which takes control. So you have a T cell immunity which comes in, and a humoral immunity which is built up, which is how we picked up the antibodies. So I think this is a very basic important knowledge that most of us have. If you do not have this, I hope that you pick this up right now, because this is a sense of everything in COVID. And the pathogenesis of idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis is with these particular things. You have TGF beta. Now, why am I dealing with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis? Is because this is the best understood lung fibrosis disease. The other lung diseases with fibrosis are less well understood, and somehow they have a correlation between this and others. The reason why I have put this up in this manner is not in a slide formation, is because I want to show that these are all published data, very authentic, very classical presentations done. And there is something called as TGF beta, which is involved in interleukins, which are involved in idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis also, right? In these studies, they have very well proven that there is something called as an integrin pathway. Okay, so you can see that the release of TGF beta, and there is this alpha V B6 activation. This is an integrin molecule. Why is this very important? Is because integrin tagged epithelial cells. So these are epithelial cells which have been tagged with integrin, and upon the release of TGF beta and the other release of other interleukins, this will transform into a mesenchymal cell, and this mesenchymal cell will become a fibroblast. So the fibrosis essentially starts in this. What we understand about drugs which we use for antifibrotics, I hope, can you see this slide which I have put up? So these are drugs, and how do they give action in the COVID era? So you have drugs, multiple drugs which are being used as antifibrotics. And many of these drugs, of course, are not available in India. Only the top two are available in India. This mTOR pathway inhibitor is available. But apart from them, these drugs are not very good at inhibiting the initial viral load. So they are not routinely being given as antiviral drugs. However, there is one point of contention that these integrin blockers and to some extent even pirfenidone could show antiviral action also. It will inhibit the acute lung injury. So this is what a COVID patient would have, an acute lung injury because of the coronavirus, and that pirfenidone can potentially inhibit it. Okay, there is a rider in this which I'll talk to you later. It does inhibit the IL-1, it does inhibit the IL-6, both of these drugs. What is very important to understand is there are drugs which are used in lung transplant, mTOR inhibitors, which is your tacrolimus and sirolimus, which are very, very commonly used drugs. And these drugs are very effective for antiviral effects. They are very effective in preventing acute lung injury. They are very effective in interleukin-1 inhibition. They are very effective in IL-6 inhibition. But unfortunately, these drugs are too toxic because they are used in lung transplantation. They have a severe immunomodulation effect, and they can cause dysregulation if in the presence of an infection. So therefore, in the absence of a very potent antiviral drug, we are not going to be able to use such kind of medications freely, especially when we have drugs like remdesivir, and we have potentially, theoretically at least, proven drugs like tocilizumab, which can work in patients. We are using steroids as immunosuppressants for our fibrosis prevention and to give our patients improvement in acute lung injury. Those patients will potentially benefit with these kind of drugs. So the important gist is that there are medicines which help in prevention and treatment of lung fibrosis. But the important question is when to start the drug and which drugs are more better. The problem, as I mentioned in this, the rider with this pirfenidone is whether it can help acute lung injury. Theoretically speaking, yes. But the trials with pirfenidone, once they were done with interstitial lung disease, shows that the drug effect happens over 3 and 6 months. So the first improvement in FEV1 was never seen in the initial few weeks. It was seen with nintedanib. It happened in 4 weeks. So 3 weeks and 4 weeks, you can have improvement with nintedanib drug. It is an extremely expensive cancer drug, but an extremely effective antifibrotic agent, which is orally available. And pirfenidone does not have any major effects even up till the age, even up till the 3rd month. So after the 3rd month, you will have benefits with fibrodone. Now, once we have understood this particular aspect, now pirfenidone does not make us very, very happy, because if you're talking about experimental acute lung injury, which is there, it has helped. But the potential side effects of pirfenidone include liver toxicity. It is a very heavy pill load. If you're combining a patient who is taking favipiravir and you're taking a patient who is taking pirfenidone, you will really have to counsel the patient well. And if you were doing it yourself, you probably would not do it, because the number of tablets would be more than 70 or 80 tablets in a 1 week span, which is not a very happy scenario for the patient. So I hope at least this one basic thing has been understood by all, that pulmonary fibrosis is going to happen to every patient who is having a COVID infection. So everybody spoke about ground glassing opacities. The sequelae is what is my worry, because once the fibrosis happens, it is not going to go away. It is going to cause a permanent lung damage. And the data has come from the SARS-CoV-1 infection, shows that around 80% of them, 80% of them have some or the other sequelae, even if it was in the mild form. And there is 20% reduction in lung functional capacity, and musculoskeletal damages are primarily the source. So even though we have so far been all discussing about the lung findings about the COVID infection or the pneumonia infection, the biggest killer is the weakness and the musculoskeletal asthenia, which sets in after the COVID issue. If you see the patient go home, he would tell you that he has lost a lot of weight. And losing weight means losing muscle mass and then losing proteins from the body, which in turn becomes the reason why the patient has got much more much more lung capacity is lost much more as compared to the lung volume. The lung volume, you could see it on the CT scan, that is acceptable, but the patient is quite breathless, and that's because his muscles are no longer able to take the capacity, and the restriction would be anywhere between moderate restriction. There were slides in Harrison that I was teaching yesterday, but that shows us how to calculate a musculoskeletal muscle volume loss. But the important question here is that you probably would be doing a pulmonary function after a month or after maybe 20-25 days to understand how much the person has lost the lung volume and the lung capacity. So the lung volume is a different question and the lung capacity is a different question. The capacity includes the muscle problems and the myopathy which comes with it. So that answers one of the questions which sir has posted me: extreme weakness following post-COVID infection. And the weakness is mainly because of interleukin 1, it's because of interleukin 6 and the anti-GF beta. So the weakness is a cause of a lot of muscle wasting. It's also a cause for diaphragmatic weakness. There is one other issue which I don't know, it didn't come up, but there is an important problem which happens that the muscles of the respiration are not always around the lung. Okay, you have muscles of respiration on the throat and also in the nose, and those also atrophy. Even though we have been giving oxygen, even though we are giving the patient NIV, the muscles are the ones that maintain the patency of the airway. And the airway on the in the upper pharynx is not a bony cage. It's not a bony airway. Like the trachea is a bony airway where you have the airway patency maintained by cartilages, but the upper airway does not have any kind of bone support. So if there is what has been described as externally induced laryngeal obstruction. So there is a patient who is trying to effort and breathe in, his larynx will collapse technically because there is a negative pressure driving his breathing. And this we see in post-COVID patients who do develop hypoxia for no reason. The patient is not breathless, but he has hypoxia. His lung X-ray or the pulmonary findings may have improved considerably. You ask him to do a walk testing, and his walk testing shows that he is not hypoxic. But at rest or at sleep, especially in sleep, he will develop a hypoxia. So that will be an important issue that we have to address in the post-COVID era, because many of these things have not happened to our previous patients. Such major acute lung injuries were almost unheard of in this mass proportions in the pre-COVID era. So very rarely we would have somebody who came with such acute lung damages with bilateral lung infiltrates turning into bilateral fibrosis with 80% lung damage. Maybe this patient is a transplant recipient or transplant waiting patient for an IPF, but usually seeing external muscle wasting in the throat and around the lungs is together not very commonly seen, but it is definitely seen along with the post-COVID patients. We have another issue that sir has pointed out is the fatigue that is there. So I think this has been addressed very well in one of the statements which has come from the sports medicine journals, because I realized that the sports is one of the events which has suffered the most. Of course, there are no sporting activities which have been happening, and that seems to trouble everybody, including me. But what is important is that this consensus has come from what is called the Stanford Hall consensus from the sports medicine journals. And so it describes those patients, especially the athletes who required oxygen therapy, who have exhibited lymphopenia and acutely should be identified and tested for radiological pulmonary changes. So I hope it answers many questions for at least asked like in the OPD basis. Patients requiring oxygen therapy, patients who have lymphopenia or the CBC changes, and those who have radiological infiltrates and pulmonary function test abnormalities. Of course, PFT would not be relatively easy to do, but we can calculate volumes based on CT also. These patients are going to be seen with a lot of lung involvement, and these lung involvement are going to be chronic in nature. So maybe long-term oxygen therapy, these are the kind of patients that we're going to be looking at. Now we have had a lot of patients who've had a lot of severe body pains for following COVID. That is those patients who've had those patients, especially not the asymptomatic ones, those patients who have got who are symptomatic, who required home care, those who required ward care and ICU care, these have had significant amount of dyspnea on discharge. They have an anxiety phenotype, so they have a patient who could be very anxious when he is going home, and he could be wanting to repeat more tests and find out more about himself. Those patients who've gone into depression either because of financial loss or because of spending multiple days in the ICU, there is a prolonged pain syndrome and a physical incapacity which they have noted. So they could be having generalized body aches, and these patients have a markedly very poor quality of life. They are difficult to get back to their normal activity. This entire syndrome together has been called as the post-intensive care syndrome. So after these patients who have been discharged or they have been going to wards with requiring oxygen for long periods of time cannot rehabilitate very, very easily. And so these patients who would otherwise rehabilitate in other pneumonias within a week or two probably require up to 3 or 4 weeks before they can be even sent to their regular work. So when to join duty is basically after around 3 weeks, when the patient is able to sit up from his own chair. Now, MET means metabolic equivalence, which means patient is able to stand and walk and move on his own. More than 6 MET is when you run. So this will give you a general idea. 1 MET is when you are able to sit and do normal activities. 6 MET is when you are running. So somewhere between the two, when you are doing a daily activities and he's able to do it comfortably for after 3 weeks of his discharge, and there is no presence of any sore throat, body ache, shortness of breath, cough and fever and other breathing problems, and the patient does not have any anxiety and depression and pain related issues, then he can probably think about going home. This is provided he has completed his isolation protocol and the other people around him are also able to are also isolated well. So it would not mean a recurrent infection or traveling with the infection away and outside. Right? The other issue is what tests are needed before joining their duty. So when we have a patient to join duty, you should always have the X-ray that shows some kind of a static picture or an improvement to rule out any other concomitant lung problems which you've been having. So if you would had COPD along with this particular condition with COVID pneumonia or COVID fibrosis, then in that case you could probably get worsening of COPD. We've seen COPD getting worse because of fibrosis and fibrosis getting worse because of COPD. So I would recommend that at least an evaluation is important. We do 3-minute walk testing for patients in COVID. We do 6 minutes walk testing in a patient of in the regular patients of lung fibrosis. The reason is because in the 5th and 6th minute, you are able, your body glycogen levels have been grossly depleted. If there is evidence of any fatigue and breathing difficulty, and your level of distance covered during the walk is much less, then we know that this patient is likely to require oxygen and also long-term rehabilitation from the pulmonary perspective. Then yeah, so then they just describe majorly how to go about with exercise. I will just give you a brief output of that. And what is the role of diet? So I think I will just take 1 other minute on another important topic, and that is pulmonary rehabilitation. Okay, so
Vishal, diet is going to be covered by Meenakshi. So this pulmonary rehabilitation is more important.
So should I cover pulmonary rehabilitation?
Yes, that will be better.
So this is a standard questionnaire that we use. I think this is something which everybody needs to understand today because they'll be seeing respiratory patients. There's a formal assessment that respiratory physicians do for their patients to understand how difficult their life is because of lung fibrosis. So this is the question: have you coughed? Have you brought up phlegm? Have you have any shortness of breathing, wheezing attacks, unpleasant attacks? So this is basically the actual disease severity that we're looking at. This is called the St. George Respiratory Questionnaire. It's usually used for patients on chronic with chronic respiratory needs. Yeah. Then, so this is the actual disease problem. The next is how much is the disease impacting his own employment and activity levels. And the third is how does he manage to cope with it. So are you taking any medications? Does it make is the medication dose been increased? How is it dependency? Does the patient need everybody else's help to get around the house? Those kind of questionnaires are these kind of questionnaires are very important. And there are specific criteria where you can send the patient home and you cannot send the patient home. This is a formal assessment in the UK. The way they do it And if you have a very high St. George questionnaire, like you have more than 34 positives in this questionnaire, you cannot be asking the patient to go to work. If only when he completely recovers, you can ask them to go home. So I believe this is the most important thing, that as far as respiratory physicians, we are asked to refer, we usually do this. Sir, pulmonary rehabilitation, I'll just cover the important thing was you have to have exercise training. So every patient goes home, he will have to exercise slightly. The exercise mainly, I have put it up here. You can do these 3 basic exercises. They're not very difficult ones. If you have been doing some amount of yoga on YouTube, if you're having just some idea if someone has been doing it, you can do Sudarshan Kriya. You can try Anulom Vilom. You can try these kind of postures. So these postures are quite effective in at least bringing down the sensation of breathlessness. Okay, and they are upper limb training exercises. So this is back and upper limb training which you mostly require. The other thing that you have to focus on is what is called diaphragmatic and breath holding exercises. So if you have seen Buteyko breathing techniques, they are effective in these particular conditions. I had spoken about a condition called the expiratory or the exercise-induced laryngeal obstruction or dynamic laryngeal obstruction. There you have to do what is called myofunctional therapy. I'm sure if sir has called someone and they could probably put more ideas into myofunctional therapy. And how do you call for a follow-up? So diet also, diet I think Ajay has already spoken. We give a good high nutritious diet with colored variety of foods, and as much as possible protein intake is important because they have been losing their proteins. When do you call for a follow-up and how do you approach the patient at follow-up? And at follow-up, I'd like to do a routine blood evaluation, look for any problems there, look for any secondary infections. They've all spoken about cardiac involvement, which is very, very important, and we see a lot of embolism. So D-dimer may be required, and we'd require a repeat X-ray and a functional evaluation, and if necessary, a CT and a PFT. So CT and PFT are required after a functional evaluation if it is really, really that much relevant. Vaccinations, there is no specific guidelines to give a right answer about vaccinations. Is we usually hold them for a month giving allergy vaccinations and also influenza vaccinations, but there is no cross reactivity between these patients. So if you give them the vaccine, they will not likely to have getting any more kind of reactions to this particular problem. So specific complications during COVID-19, for me, the scariest situation is the patients who survive the ICU. It's okay if you do not survive. I'm sorry, this may sound a little bad, but if you do survive, you have 80% lung fibrosis, something that's going to live with you for a long time. These patients recover, but they recover very slowly, and they are grossly bedridden, and they will require a very high dependency care. So this kind of patient is a really painful situation to be in because we see a lot of IPF patients and we see a lot of chronic lung disease patients. So if they're tracheostomize and they are left on bed, it's a very agonizing pain for them and they pass very slowly. So it's a really difficult area where we have to focus on palliative care and then decide more how to make these patients comfortable, because these patients usually will take anywhere between 6 months to 8 months to get slight improvements in oxygenation, and they may require oxygen for life also. So there are patients who do require oxygen, and they are mostly those with the gross CT severity score for fibrosis or for pneumonias. The way it has been discussed, the importance of CT I think is very, very paramount when we see COVID patients, and that is because it helps to know the follow-up. And like I mentioned before, drugs like pirfenidone or nintedanib have started early, they can potentially reduce the fibrosis, but of course these are theories and it's not a proven fact because many of these drugs have to be started on top of existing infections. So there's a lot of controversy with regard to that, and currently no guideline recommends starting pirfenidone on the first day of admission. I think what patient education and post-successful treatment completion, will you use a mask at home if all members were infected and successfully treated for 5 to 7 days? I said yes, because mask does not prevent you from getting an infection, it prevents the others also. At the same time, you may have someone in the neighboring house who may give you an infection. So using a mask has no harm, but it has a lot of more benefits than that. So on the benefit to harm scale, it helps scores more. And what parameters do you do on discharge and at what intervals? I think that has already been the concept of post-COVID OPD. So for us, the post-COVID OPD is to look for whether oxygenation is required, in the long run, which means the patient was discharged on home oxygen, and what is the future with that. The second is how badly is the lung damage? Does he require support in ventilation for his lungs? And if he does not require it, how quickly and how in what method can we start reducing the oxygen and see his safety as a priority? Do we need to look for other problems like cardiac issues, infections? These are very important questions. And if they are suspected in the patient, they should be looked at as early as possible because they have been on anti-IL-6 treatment or anti-IL-6 blockers. And post-COVID OPD, you are more concerned about the functional rehabilitation and psychological rehabilitation because the patients have gone through a lot of anxiety. They are very scared to go back into a normal society and their own household. So those are issues that we have to take up very at the core of these issues, because without the patient's normal psyche being developed, they don't want to understand everything else. I think I would stop here. If sir, do you want me to take the acapella thing right now?
Yes, that will be better because people are interested in knowing what are the various gadgets which you use for pulmonary rehabilitation.
Right. So actually for pulmonary rehabilitation in this setting, I would not recommend using the Acapella device. Acapella device is for expiratory flow limitation diseases. Now asthma, COPD and bronchiectasis are the major models for expiratory flow limitation. Okay, you could argue with me that in ILD you will have bronchiectasis, but in this particular ILD, in the pattern that we see in COVID, we very rarely get a bronchiectatic pattern, and so therefore acapella may not be any choice or at all any need for this particular discussion, because COVID patients, we will not be using an acapella as far as I am concerned. You need to focus on rehabilitation. You need to be focusing on rehabilitation in these things that I pointed out: exercise, nutrition, discuss the disease, techniques to save energy, which I mentioned before, and breathing strategies. The way it was mentioned, we could do the posturing and psychological support, and group support may also help. So I would relatively reserve these particular devices like the acapella. I'll just tell you, this is the adult acapella, this is the pediatric acapella. Both of these are used in acute care settings, not to be used in chronic care settings. This acapella is the next one in which you will be using it for long-term care also. So I have had great experiences with these devices. There is also one that I have in my drawer that is given by the Lupin Pharma. But they have the similar concept. This has been used a lot in the Western world, and it is very, very effective, provided it is given to it is given to the expiratory flow patients. Hello.
Hello. Vishal, wait for a minute. Unmute yourself, Vishal. I have muted all because there was
I have done that. I've unmuted myself. So can you hear me now?
Yes.
So basically, these are for asthma, COPD, and bronchiectasis patients. For the patients, you want a device for inspiration. I think it's just important to ask them to use the incentive spirometer. But more than that, they should be able to do TheraBand exercises. So TheraBand is something which I would recommend. I'll just show it to you if it comes on my. It's a very simple thing. Most people have had it, or they can use dumbbells. So TheraBand is something like this. This girl is doing this. So it's a band which you have to breathe in and breathe out. And that is something that will be very, very effective in these particular kind of patients. It's actually much cheaper than this thing, incentive spirometry also. It's a simple thing where the girl has to just breathe in and expand her chest and pull in and pull out. So I would recommend this beyond anything else, and the incentive spirometry as a tool to use in these particular kind of patients. Over to you, sir. Any questions that are
please wait. Any questions directly to Ajay or Vishal? You can put it in the chat box. Vishal, can you check in the chat box anything? What kind of yoga you will recommend for these people?
I'm just switching off the screen sharing mode.
You just stop sharing your screen. In the meantime, you can talk with others and let people know what is the best kind of yogasana you will recommend to them.
So it's a choice, sir, because I like Vipassana and my wife, she likes more art of living and Sudarshan Kriya. So I can't really choose between the two of them. It's my choice to do my particular kind of meditation. Any particular yoga that you are more comfortable with, which does not make you very breathless, that is something which you need to focus on. And more it is more about mind and breathing control. It is breathing control in yoga, which is the primary focus in these particular diseases.
Okay, Vishal, thank you very much. Friends, last 5 minutes of the whole exercise. All your patients insist for 2 vaccines, pneumococcal vaccine, 2 varieties, Pneumovax 23 around 1800, this is 4300 to be given at the interval of 1 year, ideally by the previous recommendations. But Vishal, what is the current recommendation? Can it be given within uh, a short time, like say within 8 weeks?
Within 8 weeks of what, sir?
See, we have got these 2 pneumococcal vaccines. Ideally, the previous setting was you have to give it in spaced with 1 year, preferably adults, pneumococcal 13 conjugate vaccine, and then wait for 1 year and then give Pneumovax 23. But what happens with us is that because it is costly, people don't take that, they take only the Pneumovax 23. So how you practice?
So practically for us, you should give it within 8 weeks. This is how it is relatively recommended. But Pneumovax 23 given singly also has some benefit. I would just like to point out one thing: the scenario of doing the studies for Pneumovax are very different. And for Indian scenario, I think the readily, easily available antibiotics are something that we do not discount. We will discount very easily. In the US, getting an antibiotic like amoxicillin is very difficult if you don't have a prescription. It's probably not practical. You can't get a prescription. You can't get the antibiotic without a prescription. In India, if someone has a cough, he goes home and he can go to the pharmacy and easily take a amoxicillin from his pharmacist. So that gives a disregard to the patient for the fact that such expensive vaccines are being made for treating such simple conditions. But I would agree that pneumococcal is a major cause of problem in India. The fact that it needs to be understood better whether one is better than the other is something which I'm not very 100% sure. In my practice, I would give 13 and then 23 the way you had said it.
Okay. The question from Gauri is where to get pneumococcal vaccine? There are 2 distributors in Navi Mumbai. You can talk to them, Vaccine Point, and there is one direct from the manufacturer. So friends, just last few concluding remarks. The other vaccine, which is very essential for all our COVID patients who are going to recover and they are going to be working out, is a flu quadri or quadrivalent flu vaccine, which has to be taken once in a year. And those who have got a tendency to eat outside, everybody who works in Mumbai has to eat outside. So type bar is one of the essential, it is a once in a life vaccine. And the last few things about stigma attached with COVID. So why people falling ill and dying, but that too with a stigma. There is always a fear of avoiding approaching health facilities due to becoming infected while in care, fear of losing livelihoods, not being able to work during isolation, dismissal from work. As I've been fighting with few of the employers saying that they cannot dismiss the patient. Fear of socially being excluded, placed in quarantine because of associated disease, powerless in protecting the loved ones and fearing of losing loved ones, feeling of helplessness, boredom, loneliness, depression, being isolated and not working towards caring for the dependent. Stress caused due to above fears and being treated as an outcast or blamed in the spreading of the disease. तुम्हारे लिए बीमारी घर में बढ़ गई, so the patient still gets a problem. So there are 3 major psychiatric problems which can arise with COVID. One is stress, anxiety, obsession, all the symptoms which you know, but inability to cope up, giving up, and some degree of dysfunction, sleep and appetite disturbances, and ideas of sometimes the ideas of cleanliness and infection are exaggerated in the form of obsessive compulsive neurosis. Depression is possible after any viral infection, The patient feels restless because they cannot go out, and then there are all negative thinking going on. There's something called a generalized anxiety disorder, especially for the children who are studying abroad or the children or family who is staying away from them. A persistent nervousness, tension about what will happen to my family member, restlessness or feeling on an edge, irritability, muscles feeling tense and tight. This is not necessary that the person has suffered out of it. Anybody in the family can get. And if you have got something or symptoms like unexplained irritability or aggressive behavior, suspiciousness, hearing voices, false belief, or poor self-care, then it is better that you take help of your psychiatrist. It is very essential. What as a family practitioner you can do is give a sublingual anxiolytic like Melzep MD or any other benzodiazepine which can calm down the patient. Don't give antidepressant. Let the antidepressant be the part of physician or the psychiatrist. This has been talked well by Vishal. This is the lung exercises. Various types of lung exercises are available. What is your opinion, Vishal, about these lung exercises? Vishal?
Yes, sir. I just unmuted myself. This is an incentives parameter, sir. It's a very effective tool, and it's very helpful in improving the capacity of the diaphragm. Okay, the muscle that is mostly important in breathing is diaphragm, and I've again explained that diaphragm and muscles are the primary reason why the lungs can do what they do. Even if the lung is scarred, but if diaphragm is ready for it, by using this tool you can get it even stronger, that they can deal with bigger problems also.
What is the approximate cost of such type of units?
I wouldn't have an idea, sir. I'm sorry. This is approximately, but you can check it online. It's around 1,000 or something like this. I mean,
yeah,
the different models are available and the cost would probably change.
Yes. So, thank you everybody. So, be positive, be vigilant. It is not the end of the world. You as a family physician, you have got a huge load just to foresee the complications and tell the patient that the change is ahead. So, what we have learned from all the 4 people who have addressed our meeting today: avoiding alcohol, avoiding weight gain. Then let us know what are the previous medicines the patient is having. The patient has to be very compliant as far as the comorbid conditions are concerned. You have to check all the drugs what he is taking. Mahesh told about vitamin K and other vitamin cocktails. And depending upon whether you have got a normal lung or a destroyed lung, suppose if a COPD or bronchiectasis, whether you needed oxygen or not, whether you needed 5,000 rupees injection or 50,000 rupees injection, your fate changes. But friends, please be positive, please be vigilant, observe and pick up the complications as early possible, support your patient, support your patient's relatives, follow the formula of SMS. Don't take any risk of managing patients without any personal protective equipments. I just checked, there are some chats in the box. So thank you. Everybody has, yes, Devyani, pneumococcal vaccine can be given post-COVID. That is actually the therapy of choice. And 10%, what Vishal pointed is something really fantastic. COVID pandemic is 10% virus and 90% society. So please let us be together. Let us have more and more such meetings as possible. Now, after about 2 minutes, I am going to stop sharing my screen, and I am going to stop recording also. Nikhil, Ajay, Vishal, thank you very much. I see a wonderful face in the group. Jayaji Nath, sir, would you like to speak something? Jayaji Nath is associated with NMMC. He is a very popular politician. Dr. Jayaji Nath. Dr. Nath, are you there? Online? Anybody wants to say something? Because
congratulations, Dr. Sahab.
Thank you very much. Thanks.
Very nicely spoken by everyone and very informative. And keep it up.
आमचा हा 118वा CME आहे आणि आमचे डॉक्टर अरुण कोरे आणि किरण गोडसे जे आहेत फादर ऑफ दिस ऑर्गनायझेशन, त्या लोकांनी आमचे दिलीप सिंग अकाली डॉक्टर पण आहेत इथे. आम्ही खूप वेगळ्या पद्धतीने आम्ही सगळे करत असतो आणि मेनली इट इज पेशंट फ्रेंडली. आम्ही कुठल्याही फार्मास्युटिकल कंपनीकडनं पैसे घेत नाही.
मला माहिती आहे डॉक्टर साहेब,
हे
तुमचं
सगळं
ब्रह्मा विष्णू महेश तुम्ही तिघं खूप सुरुवातीपासून करताय अँड आय एम अवेअर अबाउट इट अँड ऑल दी बेस्ट. काही असेल सांगा, माझ्या लेवलची सेवा. आय एम ऑलवेज विथ यू ऑल.
आमच्या पेशंट ह्यांच्यासाठी कुणाही जर काही ऍडमिशनचा आणि कुणाचा नातेवाईकांचा प्रॉब्लेम आला तर मात्र तुम्ही मदत करा आम्हाला फक्त.
शुअर 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 सर.
आणि सोशली डॉक्टर अकाली, यू कॅन अनम्यूट युअर सेल्फ. डॉक्टर अकाली, यू कॅन अनम्यूट युअर सेल्फ. अरुण हॅज लेफ्ट.
हा डॉक्टर साहेब,
बोला.
नवी मुंबई महापालिकेने असं केलेलं आहे की कुणाला पण रेमडेसिवीर लागलं तर ते जर नवी मुंबई महापालिकेतला म्हणजे नवी मुंबई महापालिकेच्या एरियामधला पेशंट असेल, अनअफोर्डिंग असेल, जर ते आपण कॉन्टॅक्ट केलं तर त्यांना ते महापालिका पुरवेल असं आयुक्तांनी गेल्या मीटिंग मध्ये आम्हाला सांगितलेलं आहे. मी ऑनरेबल गणेश नाईक साहेब, महापौर साहेब, आम्ही जे प्रमुख लोकांची प्रत्येक मंगळवारी मीटिंग होते त्यामध्ये आम्ही म्हणलो होतो, बाबा तुम्ही बेड पुरवू शकत नाही, तुम्ही व्हेंटिलेटर पुरवू शकत नाही, कमी पडायला लागलेत ते वाढवा. परंतु बेसिकली बऱ्याच वेळा इंजेक्शनची कॉस्ट गरीब माणसांना परवडत नाही. तर अशा ठिकाणी महापालिकेच्या एरियातला असेल तर त्याला आपण द्यावं किंवा तो भले प्रायव्हेट हॉस्पिटल.
करेक्ट, थँक्यू. तुम्ही अनम्यूट करू शकता स्वतःला. अजय.
सर.
Wow, he has given a good news. You can get from remdesivir from them, from municipality.
How Mahapalika is going to make it available for free also, sir, in some days.
Yes, it's free, totally free for New Bombay taxpayer व New Bombay मध्ये राहणारा म्हणजे बेलापूर पर्यंत, दिघा टू बेलापूर पर्यंत. Commissioner has made that statement. Will give them. Just the requirement should come them. That's all.
Dr. Akali, you can unmute yourself and speak. Anybody who wants to speak, he can unmute himself or speak. I appreciate Gayatri. She was the first person to come and attend the meeting. She started at almost 4:40 only, and everybody has asked very, very good questions. So this is a time for to wind up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ajay, and all our friends who have attended this. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir, for the opportunity. Thank you everyone for attending it.
Thank you, Dr. Sir.
Yes,
thank you, Saiva.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay. I am leaving the meeting now. बोला ना.
Thank you, everybody. प्रशांत शेठ.
प्रशांत कसं आहे?
अरे प्रशांत कसं आहे?
हा व्यवस्थित आहे. आता कालपासून जायला लागलो मी क्लिनिकला.
काय प्रॉब्लेम? तू पण अडकला होता काय?
हो, आम्ही सगळे 6 जण होतो.
अरे बाबा,
घरातले सगळे त्यांच्या आजारी होते ना.
हो, सगळे एव्हरीबडी, इवन सगळे वी आर ओके नाउ.
चला, ऑल द बेस्ट. चलो, टेक केअर बाबा.
आई पण माझी 95 वर्षाची आणि मुलगा पण माझा नातू पण 7-10 महिन्याचा. एव्हरीबडी वॉज पॉझिटिव्ह.
मग तुम्ही सगळे घरीच होते की ऍडमिट होते?
नाही, आम्ही 3 जण ऍडमिट होतो. मी, माझी मिसेस आणि आई, आणि तिघ जण क्वारंटाईन घरातच होते. बाकी एव्हरीबडी फाईन. झाला आता 1 महिना होऊन गेला आज.
चला, गुड. चला, गॉड ब्लेस.
आणि डॉक्टर नाथ आणि प्रशांत, आजची तू आपले पार्टिसिपेंट्स बघ, दे आर नॉट ओनली फ्रॉम नवी मुंबई, मुंबईत पण लोक आहेत, खोपोली पनवेलवरनं पण लोक अटेंड करतायत.
नाही, मी पाहिले सगळ्यांचे फोटो. बरेच सगळे नवीन पण होते आणि बरं झालं. इट इज व्हेरी नीड ऑफ द आवर.
खूप सगळ्या म्हणजे, आणि लोकांचे प्रश्न पण खूप प्रॅक्टिकल आहेत. आणि आमची जी वेबसाईट आहे आणि फेसबुक आहे त्याच्यावर हे प्रेझेंटेशन पण अवेलेबल आहे तुम्हाला.
करेक्ट सर.
येस, थँक्यू व्हेरी मच. वी स्टॉप नाव.
थँक्यू सर. थँक्यू. बाय.